9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. In the fall of 1949, at some unspecified place in the United States, a group of scientists had set up equipment to measure background radiation, the small amount of harmless radiation that is always present in our atmosphere. This natural radiation varies to a certain degree, but will never increase by any appreciable amount unless there's a good reason. From, again, the report on unidentified flying objects by Ed Ruppelt, joined today again, Dr. Bill. What's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Living the dream, sir, as always.
Yeah.
You know, it's been nice, sunny, smoked California. I think the fires are finally winding down or doing what they're doing, but it's a lot of people lost their homes and cabins and things up there.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So, it's,
yeah.
I don't know, what are you going to do? I mean,
it's California now. I guess you got to take your chances.
Yeah, well, we have everything, so we, as they say.
Yeah.
So why be bothered about it? So you sent me a little note here on trying to bring it up again. Dr. Salvatore Cezar Pais.
Yeah.
And this is the new Nikola Tesla. That's a question mark that they put in it. He engineered devices and UFO patents for the Navy.
Yeah. This has been going on for a while, and he's been written up before. And this was just another article which he has these wild patents about different sort of propulsion mechanisms for craft, and I think he even had an invisibility thing and a bunch of stuff. And I was looking.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Go ahead. It was like a time. I don't know, time distortion, but I think it was odd.
Yeah. So I mean, the stuff is out there, and they're saying that the Navy has tested some of the stuff, and they haven't tested this, and the results are inconclusive, and they've interviewed him, and they can't, people. Yeah, I don't know.
He actually has patents on. He actually has patents on these things, but the thing is, it's a lot of some scientists have come out to say that it's a wish list. Not anybody can put this together, but what they're stating is that basically, it's like you or I coming up with an idea, but not so much technical for us, but we thought of it.
Oh yeah.
And but he's got patent. Even the scientists kind of question the fellow, how did he get a patent on this? Because it's theoretical. So I guess you can get a patent on theory, rather than actual. He has drawings. I mean, there's drawings in here, rather rudimentary, but it's got like numbers. This is this is that. But it doesn't really. I mean, you can look these things up, though. I mean,
They were saying that the patents were there online for you to look over. I don't know what to make of it. He's been written up a couple times. It's interesting stuff. I mean, they were saying that the Navy tested something and didn't see an effect or whatever. But he's got support from the Navy, and his work is continually be funded and stuff. So I don't know what to make of it.
It's a small nuclear reactor. I mean, this thing can pump out. I mean, it's 6 meters long. It's 6 meters, and it generates gigawatts of like 2 gig. Nuclear reactor. I'm not a technician. 2 gigawatt, but it can pump out about half as much as a nuclear reactor could put out. And that's pretty crazy. I mean, you can put this thing in an airplane and then, or craft, I should say. And then, but still we run across the same old problem of if you're going 1,500 miles an hour, you're getting slammed against a bulkhead, or is this thing folding space in front of you, or how is it that it can, or is it just a drone, that doesn't worry about flesh and blood? It just
I don't
goes
know.
crazy fast.
It's interesting.
That's the thing.
Well, just looking at this page, it's interesting. He's talking about a amazing vehicle would be able to zoom around with ease, both high in the air and deep in the sea. It would travel through air, water, and space by generating a quantum vacuum with an energy field, whatever that means.
So that could solve the puzzle of what happens to, flesh and blood inside the thing.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know what the effect on the occupants of this vehicle for this proposed mode of travel is. Yeah, this guy, he keeps coming up, but this fits in. You were looking into like the 0-point energy and these other things, and we were talking about the Philadelphia experiment a little bit, and this sort of ties into that stuff.
Okay.
And you could also sort of speculate these. He has speculation. He has this. He's proposed this craft that can do all this stuff, and there. Remember the video from the drug interdiction craft where they're showing that thing flying around that airport, and it goes under the water and it doesn't change speed, and it goes, does all this other stuff. I mean, this is what this guy's supposed craft could do. So you could speculate that this is one of the things that we saw in the Defense Authorization Act, Section 1652, from last time we talked, where they're asking to look into if this type of craft has been developed by, other countries or whatever. And this guy's got patents that say that this, he's got patents for craft that could supposedly do this. So I don't know what this means.
Well, again, it's, the other side is like, it's theoretical. Yeah, he's got a patent, but it's not. But the Navy isn't, allegedly, the Navy is interested.
Yeah.
And, it should be interesting. Now, this week I picked up, I don't know if you have it, I don't know if you recommended it, because I'm getting quite the collection myself now. Yeah. The Hunt for 0 Point Inside the Classified World of Anti-Gravity Technology. Have you run into that one yet?
I think I did. I read that. I think that's the one I said I read a few years ago. And I don't...
And, of course, I loaded it on my wife's Kindle, on the Kindle, or her Kindle account, I should say.
Yeah.
And she's like, what? What are you...
What are you reading? What is it?
What is the world? I don't know you were that... Well, I said I'm not that technical, but I can figure it out.
Yeah.
It's a good story. The Philadelphia experiments, with the Eldridges, I know we've talked about that.
Yeah,
it's a good story.
Yeah. I'm going to reread that book coming up.
I want to look into the Eldridge thing a little closer, at some point.
Well, I was looking at something, and they're actually saying that it was a different. I saw a thing where it says, because there's a conflict with this the guy that came up. This story is convoluted about the Philadelphia experiment, and it's. I don't know anything about it other than vaguely the movie and the book that I looked at, but the one thing I did see is that online is that the Eldridge and this guy's ship that supposedly saw the experiment weren't in port at the same time. And then there was something else that was saying, well, it may not have been the Eldridge, but actually a different ship that he saw. So, I don't know. It's going to be worth looking into. It's interesting stuff.
Well, and then, of course, we can't ignore the Nazi bell. Because this is, this thing also is, did you get a chance to read the article about the guy that actually went to the site?
Yeah.
They call it the Hinge, like Stonehenge, spelled like that.
Yeah, I looked through it. I think I'd read it before, probably after I looked at that site after I'd read that 0 Point book, which I don't remember a lot of details. I remember it was interesting, and the guy's got good speculation, but I didn't walk away with any major insights. I don't know. The hinge looks just like they showed other pictures showing the structure of the support structure under water towers that were used in Germany. So I don't know.
Well, the guy, it was an interesting story because he actually drove there.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
He was on the Autobahn, and he talked about, his experience on the Autobahn, and that he drove this little SUV thing.
Yeah.
Once he got to the site, and, he had the hinge, and it's where they think that they actually chained the bell to the hinge so it wouldn't fly away, I guess. But it's tied into the Kecksburg, it did allegedly tied into the Kecksburg UFO crash, which really had another story with Kecksburg that it was actually a Russian satellite or something that crashed because they said they saw hieroglyphics on it and they said that's Russian writing. Okay. So who knows, if that's really tied in together. But it's in the book. It's also which the secrets of the unified field. Yeah, has both stories in it. So I'm going to have to go through that. We can talk about that later on too.
Yeah. It's like I read the 0 Point book years ago, and like I said, I read it. It was interesting. I don't know. I don't remember it that well. It didn't really stick with me. But that said, it's like I think that the Foo Fighter phenomenon was a Nazi weapon. So, and not what a lot of people say. It's like the beginning of the UFO thing. I think it was a German energy weapon that was shooting, ball lightning at aircraft.
Yeah, and it wasn't really, as we talked about a few episodes ago, it really wasn't that destructive.
No, it didn't. It didn't do anything.
It was more like fireworks.
Yeah, but I mean, if you shot a ball lightning at an aircraft on the ground and it hits the ground, it's going to probably mess it up. So if it was a theoretical weapon, they tested it on shooting it at an aircraft on the ground, and they could see that it would follow aircraft in the air. As far as they knew, it was a functional weapon, untested but functional weapon. And when they were shooting it at the aircraft around Strasbourg, hey, if you're desperate, it was the end of the war. Deploy a experimental weapon, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it worked, it could have been a game changer if it had worked. And it would have been nuts if it had worked, but it would have been a game changer because they would have just been knocking planes down out of the air, left, right, and sideways.
Well, it's kind of weird that it's a weird story that it's weird that right at the end of the war, the Nazis have look at the ME-262, their jet fighter that they built. Not very efficient, but it was a jet fighter. And, when we saw that thing in the air, when we had Mustangs, which were state of the art at the time, it was scary. I mean, those things were fast, and they, if they'd have been able to mass produce those things. Oh, yeah. I mean, that would have been a game changer with the war, too. I mean, got the Nazi, they got this. The Nazi bell is not really could be a folklore. I don't know. But what was the hinge they said was a cooling, I think the people, the guy that went over there actually talked to some of the people that lived in the area, the indigenous people. And they said it was a cooling tower. They said, "Oh yeah, this isn't the only one of these things. It's a part of a cooling base or something." I don't know. So I don't know what the thing really was, but well, it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah, it's one of those stories. I like it, and watch Iron Sky. They have the Nazi. They have the bells.
I think I've seen. Yeah, I got to set it up on. I think it's on Netflix. I got to set it up and watch that. Yeah. There are certain things there are certain movies that Debbie will hang with me, and this isn't going to be one of them. I can tell you already. It's and there's a part 2. Did you see part 2?
Yeah, I've seen part of it. I don't think I've watched the whole thing. I should watch it. It's got some great scenes in it.
The reviews are pretty good. Ironically enough, for a story like that.
and it was a low-budget movie, and I think they had a great idea. I don't think they managed to carry it off as well as they could have, but it was great idea for a movie. It's up there with the idea is up there with the first Hellboy movie, which was
the best of all the Hellboy movies.
Yeah, and it was just so well structured and the whole bit. They could have done that with Iron Sky if they'd worked a little harder on it.
I don't think they had the money.
No, they were. I think they were building it as they went along, and as they got more money, they were able to sort of complete the project and stuff. But for what they did, it was a good job, very good job. Hey, I wanted to mention that we are talking about. Been looking into Edward J. Ruppelt's book, The Report on Flying Objects, and for people that are interested, that book is open source, and you can find it online for free. It's on. I think you can find it on Google Books. You can find it on the archive.org, and you can find it on the Global Grey Books, which is a website out of the UK where a woman takes books and she curates them. Because if you download a book from like Google Books, they've scanned it in, and if you scan it in as an e-book, it's got a lot of errors in it. So what this lady has done is she's gone in and she's corrected the errors and cleaned up the text. And she asked for a donation, but you don't have to give a donation. I gave a donation. I wanted an e-copy of the report of unidentified flying objects, and I downloaded it from her site, and I gave a donation. And she's not a sponsor, so she's not getting any money out of this. But but I wanted that if anybody's interested and they want to read the book that we're talking about, it's free, it's online, there's multiple sources to find it. I think it's in PDF format. Also, you can find Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Kehoe. That's an open source book, and you can find it online. And you can find Coming of the Saucers by Arnold, is also free and open source online. This lady, Global Grey Books, has copies of these books curated, and you can find them there. She has it under Occult and Spiritualism or something.
Really?
Yeah, but I mean, it's got a ton of stuff in there. She's got fiction in there too. It's got all sorts of stuff. But
I didn't pay for mine. Did you get a hard copy of it?
Well,
too?
I have a hard copy, but I wanted an e-copy so I could search it.
Good.
So I could search the text. And I mean, like I said, you can get it from a couple other sites, but this site, she's curated it. A lot of when Google had a great idea of putting together, all the libraries of the world online, and then they, people poopied their pants because of copyright stuff, and the U.S. copyright law was changed because of Disney, so a copyrighted thing is copyrighted for like 1,000 years, and to save Mickey Mouse, save Mickey.
Yeah, well, we love Disney. We all love Disney.
Yeah. Not so much.
Did you ever hear about? We're going to get off on a tangent. The kid that had passed away that wanted. Oh, I can't remember. I think it was which Marvel character it was, but he really loved it. I don't know if it was Iron Man or what. I should have. I just kind of.
I remember that vaguely. Yeah.
And he wanted, so they put it on his tombstone. And then Disney came in and said, "Nope, can't do it. It's copyrighted."
Can't do it. Copyrighted.
I thought that was the shittiest thing I've ever heard.
Oh no, that was bad. That was bad. And that's just the people are just This is what I'm talking about. People are just stupid. Anyway, but these books are available if you need them. The current copyright law is, I think it's 90 years after the death of the author, so a lot of stuff is from the 30s, I think, is coming out off of copyright. These books were published in the 50s, but the authors are dead, and there's nobody to contest the fact that these are open source and online. And I think... I probably shouldn't do this. I think Ruppelt had a daughter, and she probably could contest this. And if I was her, I would, and I'd put out editions of this book and actually profit from it. Kehoe Kehoe has a bunch of books, but his first book is apparently allowed to be free on online. The other ones, I think some of them have been reproduced, or you got to buy them. A lot of these older UFO books that I've been bringing together, some of them aren't even reprinted anymore, so which is why the price is get high on these things.
Yeah.
But anyway, 2 cents. The book's free. If you want it, find it, read it. It's the Ruppelt, the Report of Unidentified Flight. It's a great read, and it's the guy that started Project Blue Book, and he lays it out. So it basically, what you'll walk away from, or what we've walked away from, is there's something going on. I mean, you don't know what's going on, but there's definitely some sort of phenomenon going on. And as we've seen with the Pentagon and Project Galileo at Harvard and all this other stuff, some very serious people are finally, after 70 years, agreeing with this, that this needs to be looked at scientifically. And this is what Hynek was fighting for, and this is what McDonald was fighting for, and there's even a physicist at Stanford, David F. Salisbury, was promoting, and he's still promoting it. So anyway, all right, that's it. The commercial is now.
Is the
over.
commercial for
the commercial is now
the report on unidentified flying objects is now concluded?
Now concluded. Read the book. Find the book. It's free if you're interested.
This is what we're talking about, but we're not talking about every single detail, only the highlights.
Yeah.
You could listen to us, but you're going to get a lot more if you actually go into the book itself.
Oh yeah.
So the radiation story. So I got it. I started reading this, and the book. I don't want to say dry, but there's a lot of they're not as it's been inconclusive as to what the results of the findings are. Yeah, we saw UFOs, and we had jets chase the UFOs, and in this episode, I found intriguing the radiation story. So, he runs across a group of scientists who accidentally figured out they were running a Geiger counter. You're more into the science, but they're running a modified Geiger counter, basically. And all of a sudden, the thing spikes. So instead of going, it's like, and then and then all of a sudden, one of the guys from the group came in and said, "I saw a flying saucer," and it just happened. They put it together that it coincided with the Geiger counter reading coincided with the flying saucer flying over. So so then it gets around. Ruppelt gets a hold of the story, drops everything, flies back to the West Coast, talks to the scientist. There was more before this, but talks to the scientists who concurred that that's what happened. So they did a lot of experiments. They were up on this. They call it the rock hounds. They pretended like they were studying geology, but in reality they were modifying this device, and they had nothing for like a year. I think nothing happened, and all of a sudden, it happened again. And then it happened again and again, and then all of a sudden the rock hounds got their degrees. And they went on to their profession, and the thing kind of disbanded. But the story came out, and Ruppelt got a hold of it, and then, he talked. There was an officer, there was a colonel involved, and the head scientist that looked into it. And they agreed that, but it's funny because it was not official, so they were doing all this on the side. It wasn't under government direction. It was like their hobby, basically.
Well, there was actually, so Ruppelt disguises a lot of the details, and so I have in front of me a list of all the communists in the Department of Defense. Kind
Of a what? Wait a minute, what?
Yeah. No, that's from the McCarthy hearings in the 1950s too.
You get them better. Yeah.
So anyway, what I have is a summary. So Project Blue Book's depository, for each sort of incident, they would have a summary card. So I have a copy of the summary card from Project Blue Book. I have the summary report from the Project Blue Book report number 9, dated January 1953. No, Project Blue Book report number 10, 27 February 1953. Classified secret, which has now been unclassified. So the original Project Blue Book summary card from their files states this: October 14, 1949, location Mount Palomar Observatory, California, time 1:15 and 1:20 p.m. Summary: Observatory Manager of Public Relations Harley C. Marshall drove away from observatory when he saw a perfect V of V's formation of about 16 to 18 silver objects without tails or wings overhead, traveling at a high 1 + 1 EM. Oh, I don't know what. So.
Damn it! You didn't do the calculation.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. 1 + 1 EM effects on cosmic ray detector speed to the northwest, emitting sound like jets but not quite the same, which noticeably lagged behind visual location of objects in the sky about 35 to 40 degrees. Marshall stopped car and observed objects disappear behind cloud cover that extended from horizon to about 45 elevation. He returned to the observatory and phoned Assistant Superintendent Electrician B.B. Traxler on duty, who at about 1:20 p.m. saw one dark, unidentified object traveling to the southwest while checking the cosmic ray Geiger counter recording equipment, and saw that the needle had jumped off scale for several seconds. For the next 10 days, another 21 incidents of off-scale cosmic ray detector incidents occurred at scattered times, fitting a periodic 1.5-hour time schedule, which is interesting. Which means that sounds like it's some sort of natural event or potentially a equipment problem, but I don't know. A phenomenon not seen before or after, which would and unexplained by equipment failure or radio interference from aircraft. Several Navy aircraft of different prop and jet types were flown near Palomar Observatory using radio altimeter and radars on October 21 and November 2nd in an unsuccessful effort to trigger the Geiger counter. Albert Falk was a scientist working at the detector at Mount Palomar, was chief scientist, Naval Electronics Laboratory. Later chief scientist, Point Mogu Naval Missile Test Station. I know Dr. Falk's son, who unfortunately doesn't know anything about the Mount Palomar events. I actually read something about this somewhere else. I looked all morning. I couldn't find where I'd read that. The second location that Ruppelt talks about in his chapter is Los Alamos. So that's where the other, I think that's where, when he talks about the major, where the second sighting, or in the book chapter where they're talking about the major saw it and they couldn't find any records, and Rockhounds, Colonel had no records of group operation, but he knew who had it. Then he promised to wire them personally. Data had been, the Colonel's Eagles, the word of the Rockhounds work spread to a large laboratory in the east. That was Los Alamos. And
was it?
That's what I saw that. Yeah, I saw that somewhere else in something that I read. And there's so much, there's just so much stuff. I mean, it's like I talk about the conspiracy thing with the strings and stuff. I got to figure out some way to organize this information. An Air Force colonel told the story to some friends. They decided to look personally in the situation. The colonel's group got permission to check the records of radiation survey station. This is at Los Alamos, and look over the logs of the radar stations. They found instances where during the same period of time that radiation in the area had been much higher than normal. radar had a UFO on the scope. These events had occurred during a period of January 1951 until June of 1951, and this original... Oh yeah, it's in here too. It's in the report. It says 50, 51, 52. The same occurrence had taken place at the Los Alamos Scientific Laboratory in Los Alamos, New Mexico. That's in the unclassified secret status report from Project Blue Book for 1953, of February 1953. Now
I don't know. It's just kind of now. Okay, can you make one of these things? I mean, it appears it can take a lot of power.
No, it's just a Geiger counter. I think it's just a Geiger counter. They're talking about cosmic ray detectors, and I'm not too sure how that was. So going back, one of the things that was Los Alamos would have radiation detectors all over the place, right?
Right.
Palomar was doing cosmic ray detecting equipment, and I'm not really sure what that equipment was, but I'm assuming it's just basically like a Geiger counter. And they, they saw this and tried to correlate what they were seeing. Now the Project Blue Book, it says in their summary report, says to further inquiry in the matter, the Navy report on October 1949 was obtained. Navy report. Oh, I guess the Palomar Observatory is a naval observatory. Okay. At the same time, the radiation picked up some unknown flurry. Personnel observed something in the area. They said in one instance the object appeared similar to a bird, in another instance very similar to formation of aircraft, which that's the description that I had from the Project Blue Book summary card. The Navy detailed checking the equipment and went so far as to fly aircraft, which they talked about, determine whether or not radar or other electronic equipment in the aircraft could have caused a sudden burst of radiation.
But they flew quite a few different aircraft. It sounds like
it's a Navy,
figure out if this is what it was caused.
Yeah, it's a Navy observatory, so they actually, this is a good follow up. They triple checked the equipment. They flew aircraft. And then they finally determined that there was a very good possibility that the sighting and the detection of radiation was merely a coincidence. That the objects were possibly birds or aircraft, and the sudden burst of radiation was due to a malfunction of the equipment or interference that is not completely understood at the present time. And that's actually interesting, but they don't follow up with the...
Well, they did this thing for a year, for a couple of years, and then they would go up every... You didn't have to be there. It had a detection, a recording of some sort.
Yeah, and then they tried
to show what happened.
And they tried to coordinate that with UFO sightings. So they thought that the people that set up the equipment thought that they had seen something. The Los Alamos group thought that they had seen coincidences in these things. So I think this is one of the things where we talk about finding direct evidence of UFO sightings. So like people are talking about getting material that fall off them, or whatever else. But this is one of the things that actually is a strong correlation for if you have a sighting, you have a radiation. This stuff was never followed up on. It was just sort of shut down. And from the Roberts Committee thing, which we'll talk about next time I'm available, since I won't be here next week. The two reported from the Roberts report, the cosmic ray phenomenon. 2 reported cases were examined. One at Palomar Mountain, California, October 1949, when cosmic ray counter went off the scale for a few seconds, apparently while a V of flying saucers was observed visually. And 2, a series of observations by Los Alamos Bird Watchers Association. Okay. From August 1950 to January 1951, when cosmic ray coincidence counters behaved queerly. Dr. Alvarez, who was part of the Roberts panel, he was quickly to point out the recorded data were undoubtedly due to instrumental effects that would have been recognized by as such by more experienced observers, and Alvarez later won the Nobel Prize for his work. So I'm of two minds on this. I figure that Alvarez would definitely know what he was talking about if he looked at this equipment, because I think he was a radar expert. And but also the people at Los Alamos and the people at the Naval Observatory, when Palomar Observatory was a naval observatory, they would also know their equipment and the sort of idiosyncrasies of this stuff. So my question is, I don't know. I don't think Los Alamos would have screwed up the equipment, but we don't know who the people were. We don't know their qualifications or their level of experience. So it's one of these things where there was an opportunity to sort of explore unusual physical evidence of UFO sightings, and it wasn't followed up. It's one of those things where you make an observation and then you go, okay, we should do more, but they never did more.
Well, they ended up, they had they could get the equipment, but it's a hobby. I mean, they can't just grab stuff out of Los Alamos. Yeah, we're going to use this.
Well, at a place like Los Alamos, I think they could just pretty much grab the equipment and use it. Because I've worked at universities and been around these facilities.
As long as they're on this, can you take it off? They're still on the facility premises, right?
Yeah, they're still in the area. Yeah, and you can borrow equipment. You just tell people, you check it out. You tell people that you're taking the equipment, and if the stuff's not being used, everyone's generally, this is my experience, everyone's generally fine with you using it as long as they know where it is and they trust you to not, smash it against the wall. So, anyway, I think that this is a really, really interesting observation. I don't think it was pursued enough. It
was a modified Geiger counter. Like you and I can't just grab a Geiger counter, and I always picture a Geiger counter. You'll know about. I haven't seen you. Don't you have a Geiger counter?
Yeah, I do. One? Yeah, I do. So
is it like, what does it look like? I mean, I pictured the one you see on the science fiction shows where it looks like
mine's a little brown box,
almost like a detector with the head cut off. Yeah.
Do
you turn it on to see if there's any radiation around?
Yeah. I mean, I have. I have it. Yeah, I don't see it. I should carry it with me wherever I go, though.
Hook it to your car.
Along with my UFO binoculars. The Radioactive Boy Scout, which is a great book to read. This kid was fascinated with radiation, and he would have a Geiger counter on the dashboard of his car when he drive around, and he liked to gather radium or radioactive stuff. So he would. There's one thing in the book where he's driving past an antique store and his Geiger counter went off. So he goes in there and he found clocks or something that have the radium. The radium dials. Yeah. So and he did.
You ever see the story where people used to paint that stuff on them because it would glow?
Yeah.
And they would paint it back in the in the 50s.
Yeah,
and the stuff they put on the clocks that would glow, and then they would paint themselves, and they do all these weird exploits in the bedroom and things because they're all painted up. And it turned out they were dying because it was radioactive.
Oh yeah, well
my god!
The people that used to paint the clocks, they would wet the brushes in their mouths.
Oh god!
Yeah. So a lot of those people got really sick from that. It was before we knew anything about radiation or the negative effects of radiation. So the radiation phenomena I thought was interesting. The problem is with a lot of this stuff is they didn't correlate the data. Like Dr. Alvarez came in and said there's something wrong with the thing. This should have been something that Blue Book should have picked up on. Got validated equipment and set it up as like an observatory type thing.
Yeah, experiment.
They're talking about with cameras, but like in the air bases and the nuclear test facilities where they're saying they're seeing a lot of UFOs. Set these up, correlate it with radar sightings. And I think in the Los Alamos, they were saying that they correlated some of these radiation these spikes with radar sightings. The interest I think by the scientists in the cosmic ray aspect of it is because cosmic rays are very, very highly energetic, highly penetrative particles. And remember, at the time in the 1950s, nuclear energy was new, and the nuclear fusion reaction is the chain reaction is you have neutrons coming off of the radioactive material and splitting the atoms of other molecules and more neutrons, and it's basically the thing if you have like the mouse trap. You've seen the videos of the mouse traps with the ping pong balls.
Yeah.
And you throw some ping pong balls in there and they all go off and they all bounce around, so it's like a simulation of a chain reaction. And the speculation in the 50s was like if the neutron chain reaction generated so much power, if you could use cosmic rays to generate power, it would be so much more. So the speculation was flying saucers were harnessing the power that would generate cosmic rays. So they would leak cosmic rays when they would be flying around, and you could detect them. And that's where the Palomar Navy people were trying to detect. And in Los Alamos, I think it was just standard radiation detectors, just because they have detectors all over the place for the facility. And
right.
And there you could go and look at the radiation logs. You look for spikes, and then you could look at the radar logs or the UFO logs and do a correlation. And they were saying that they saw something. They saw a correlation of the data. And then everybody went away and no follow-up. And Project Blue Book didn't do a serious follow-up. And I think that's mainly because what we've heard about with Project Blue Book, they didn't have the resources. They were understaffed. They didn't have a big budget, and they just had to cover a lot of ground. So anyway, hey, there's a sighting that I thought was in this report too, from the report number 9 at White Sands. That was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So the conclusion of, I'm going to read it backwards. This was an event that happened, White Sands, New Mexico, 25th November 1952. And this is from the January 53, I think it's February. No, this is a January 53 Blue Book status report, confidential, unclassified currently. The conclusion was insufficient data for evaluation. Discussion of the incident. It is possible the object was an aircraft, except from the description it appeared to be low if it were an aircraft, and evidently no sound was heard.
Right.
No follow-up investigation was made, and since additional data are needed, no evaluation can be made. So this was a following extract from the monthly intelligence summary, White Sands Proving Ground. The source is a field-grade officer assigned to White Sands, and this is his statement. While returning to White Sands Proving Ground from Beaumont Hospital at approximately 20-30 hours on November 25th, 1952, I observed what appeared to be flares or pyrotechnics on the right side of the road. My first thought that these objects were flares that were being fired by troops on a night project. However, shortly thereafter, a matter of seconds, I observed what appeared to be a flare land right in the middle of the road, about 300 or 400 yards distance.
Wow.
It assumed the shape of a ball having a green center, fading to a light hazy blue at the exterior. This light disappeared before my car arrived at the spot. After observing this light, I thought what the Department of Army had a new type pyrotechnics that I was not familiar with that they were using on a night problem. Approximately 3 to 5 minutes later, I observed a light or a series of lights approaching from the right side of the road in the heavens at an altitude of about 300 to 500 feet between 1/4 and 1/2 mile distant. I thought that probably in conjunction with the night problem, this was an airborne drop of troops. I first thought it might be a C-119 or a C-123. However, this object made a right-hand turn above the road and then disappeared at an angle of approximately 90 degrees straight into the sky.
Wow.
I cannot state whether it was a plane or a type of aircraft. I can merely state that there were 2 rows of what appeared to be windows, brilliantly lighted, and I would estimate that they were 5 to 6 feet in height and 6 to 8 windows in each of the 2 rows. After this object disappeared, I stopped my car and got out to see if I could see a plane, but could see nothing. I turned off the motor on my car to see if I could hear the motors of a plane, but I could hear no sound. I then proceeded to White Sands Proving Ground. So that's pretty wild.
That is crazy.
That is. And it's monthly intelligence summary from a field grade officer at White Sands. So this is definitely not, this is a guy just reporting what he saw. But he's coming from the hospital, so who knows?
Yeah, who knows what was up there.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because they wanted to use, at some point, the colonel that got involved with the project after it got out of what the Rockhounds were doing up in their shack on the top of the hill and checking every 2 days. And he said they decided that they were going to develop this thing and put it on aircraft and see if they could use it for UFO detection, I'm assuming. And it never happened. I think they tried to get it to project, and then it was evaluated by other scientists who decided that, hey, you didn't see any, there's no photographic evidence of the UFO to collaborate the radiation detection phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I think they killed it at that point.
Yeah, we know from reading, I think it's Kehoe's books, or his first 2 books, that the Pentagon had 2 different factions. They had a faction that was like, something's going on, and they had a faction like, this is just nonsense. And then when you have, let's put additional equipment in an aircraft. I mean, it's like the camera systems that Project Blue Book wanted to put together, and Project Galileo at Harvard is now doing 70 years later. They couldn't get the resources. And we've talked about that sort of with the modern aspect of these UAPs that the Navy's seeing. It's like when things will go up the chain, everything goes up the chain of command. And at some point, there's a level of approval, budget approval, project approval, and everything goes up through layers. You don't know how many layers there are. There could be 5, there could be 50. And anybody at one of those layers can go, no. And it shuts everything down. And I think you see that all the time, and with this, especially with the UFO phenomenon in the 50s, you had a strong cohort in the Pentagon saying this is just nonsense, this is waste of time, it's a distraction. We have more important things to do, such as fighting the Soviet Union. And you had the other group saying something is going on, we need to get serious about researching it. And it's taken 70 years for people to finally, for the Pentagon and even academia at this point to say, and there are scientists at academia that look into this stuff currently, to say, okay, there's a phenomenon, let's get real about it. Let's do a real scientific investigation. And this Geiger counter cosmic ray detector thing, I think, is a great approach because it gives you 2 correlates for your observation. Actually gives you what are the criteria that Kehoe would talk about? You needed a visual sighting and a radar sighting, radar track. Right? Is that it? Visual and radar? And then, so what you would have is you'd have a radar track, you'd send an aircraft, an F-94. The F-94, the pilot would get a visual, and then the craft would get a radar log. So you'd have radar, visual, radar. And all you needed to do is put Geiger counters on these airplanes.
Right. And that's what they that's what they were talking about doing. Yeah,
the interceptors, it would have been awesome because then, a modern or even an older 1950s intelligence jet with a camera, they had the camera guns. Set up interceptors with camera guns, a radiation detector with a recorder, maybe even something to record you don't need it because you got the pilot and the... I made a mistake when I was talking about F-94s. F-94s have a front guy and a back guy. The back guy is the targeting guy, the weapons weapons targeting, and the pilot.
Right.
So so you'd have visual, radar, radiation, and film. So you'd have witness, film, radiation. I mean, they could have done this. It was simple, and the equipment was. I mean, they could have done it with state-of-the-art equipment at the time, and they just never followed up with this. And I think it was just the multiple factions in the Pentagon that were fighting it. And all it needs is, like, you might hit 3 levels of officers or of the bureaucracy that say, yeah, this is interesting, and then you hit someone that's like, this is just nonsense. Shut it down. And no budget approval. And everything runs on budgets. So
Yeah, the money.
yeah.
So they killed it because they had a group of scientists that said there was no solid evidence that one had anything to do with the other, basically.
Well, Alvarez carried a lot of weight. I mean, this is the guy that's on the Roberts panel, and him saying they screwed up the electronics could cause this artifact. I mean, I see that, and I'm going, yeah, okay. I gotta. The guy has such a big reputation, was such a big dog at the time. It's like, you hate to say. I mean, it happens. You can look at. I mean, there are scientists, a lot of scientists that make mistakes, but I hate to look at somebody like Alvarez and go, the guy was full of shit. But I have the question because everyone else, these people worked with the equipment and they knew it, but Alvarez was one of the people that was building and inventing the equipment at the time, so I'm hard to say that he didn't know what he was doing. I saw this recently. I was reading an older article by Eddington, who was a early physicist, and I read a sentence in this thing, and I'm going, this is just wrong. And I'm looking at this sentence and go, this is just backwards. Eddington has it backwards. But then I'm like, but it can't be backwards because this is Eddington. This is the guy that laid this stuff out or discovered this stuff. He can't have it backwards. So it's just like, okay, so my understanding is screwed up. And maybe he's wrong. I don't know. I gotta check it out. Oops. You gotta reach. I dropped something. So anyway, yeah, I love reading this stuff and being sort of waffling, going, well, I don't know. It could be this. It could be that. I mean, it's the whole story of UFOs for the past 70 years.
I'd love to see what modifications and recording methods they were using. I'm sure it's beyond our capability to set up or not. I just put it on my desk.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just keep an eye on it that way. Could it be that simple? No, probably not. But
they have. I mean, you can always get a EMF meter, like they're using in the. What's that ranch? Skinwalker Ranch.
Skinwalker Ranch. Yes.
Yeah. They're using EMF recorder. You can always. That's something. So I mean, it's like if you were. I mean, you'd have to investigate this. You'd have a Geiger counter. You'd have an EMF recorder. This is all. None of this equipment is new equipment. The only difference now between the 1950s is that the stuff is small. So instead of a bulky thing with solid state electronics, it's all microchips and some other small electronics. So yeah, I mean the ability to seriously search and test, and it's being done. The new Defense Act is telling the armed forces to modify their equipment and their procedures to record and report these incidents. Project Galileo is setting it up. I'm sure they'll set up these scopes, and if they're smart, these scopes will have they're sky searching scopes. I forget what they're called. They're dragon eyes. We'll have EMF and radiation detectors built into them. It just makes sense. And now with everything, it's easy to hook it up and have record it. Threshold, just like we're doing with this audio stuff. You have a threshold level. So if the radiation or the EMF comes up a certain level, you start recording, and the camera starts recording, and you're getting a lot of data. And this is not something that
not new technology.
No, it was bulky technology in the past. Now it's just like it's cheaper and it's easier to build and set up. So
So what do we do? So now
What do we do?
What do we do now? The radiation with the detections there. Galileo can see the UFOs. There it is. I got a picture of it, just like we're getting tickets and Tic Tac.
Yeah.
What do we do now? What happens next? We see you. I mean, it feels like, because they're dicking with us. I mean, based on the Tic Tac video from, I think that was 2014. It went back to, it knew where the jet was going back to its rally point.
Yeah.
And it went back on its own. Now, it was like, you're screwing with us. I mean, on the interview, it's like the thing was toying with us. And I don't know. It's weird. I mean, hopefully Galileo can shed some light on this.
Yeah, I don't know.
What do we do now? Okay, yeah, we see them. We know they're there. Should we just ignore them? I mean, they're not doing anything but just flying around. I mean, they're not running into us. They're not shooting laser beams at us. They don't have grays falling out with ray guns shooting at us.
Make it interesting. Make it fun.
Well, at least make it. Yeah, don't bore me.
Yeah, make it fun. Hey, did you want to talk about the? Oh, there's a couple more things. There was the Japanese sighting we didn't talk about last time.
Yeah, when they.
What is this? This is that's the
from
white.
The last.
Yeah, that's from the last one. That was White Sands. They have watched. This report also talks about incidents in Washington D.C. again. This is the same report that I was talking about. Status report number 9. Showed same pattern behavior as before. The 900 to 100 miles an hour. The radar tracks over DC. Reported seen on previous night. Stated above. This report similar to ones reported from the Washington National Airport Tower. Great deal of discussion as to the effects of inversion. Blah blah blah. Nothing. Okay. So yeah, this is project number 10. Oh, 10 was the correlation of radiation counts. This is interesting.
Why don't we just shoot them down?
I've been saying this for a long time. It's funny. I'm looking at these reports. Report number 9 is confidential, and then report number 10 was secret. So they upped the. For some reason, they upped the classification status of these reports. That's funny. So the Japan. What did it say? Last month, a definite increased number of reports received from FEAF by ATIC, and I don't know what that is. This is sightings over northern Japan. Publicity in national press. Certain number of observations from northern Japan near Russian-held territory. They have been given a good deal of attention by Project Blue Book. Colonel in an F-84 over Hokkaido Island. The second pilot radar observer in an F-94 aircraft also over northern Japan. Reports of both sightings have been received. F-84 sighting was analyzed as a probable star. Ooh, okay, great.
Yeah.
F-94 report involves a radar contact by the radar observer with a simultaneous visual sighting of the object and cannot be explained at the present time. So that's sort of the classic standard for the 50s, was you had a visual radar F-94 sent in, and then radar contact by the radar observer, and a visual sighting, and then nothing. I mean, they don't even have a statement from the pilots or anything.
It's almost commonplace. Like, it's another, it's another UFO sighting. Now they just recently allowed, like, we're in 2021, and now all of a sudden, it's okay to report these things. You're not going to get your flight status pulled.
They could. They had serious penalties for them talking about this stuff.
So nobody wanted to talk about anything unless they was, anonymous.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So we shoot what they say they do about 1,500 miles an hour. I mean, some of our missiles, some of our aircraft interceptors, interceptor missiles, I believe can do at least 1,500 miles an hour, but maybe you can't get radar lock on the thing. I don't know. But, again, when Robert and I did an episode of Why Can't We Find You? Where are the aliens? That's one of our early episodes.
Yeah.
And I mean, we say, well, the thing's not big enough to carry like a person. Well, grays or whatever could be really small. Maybe they're tiny.
Tiny.
Maybe they're little tiny grays.
Tiny people.
But like you said, maybe they're drones. But it'd be nice to just shoot one down and, see what's... Hopefully there's nothing alive inside. But or all of a sudden, a million of them, we shoot one down, a million show up and start shooting at it.
Or they're AIs. I mean, if it's an AI, the size doesn't matter. I mean, it could be the limitation.
Small as anything.
Yeah, so technology is the limitation on the size if it's AI. So
it could be a hummingbird. It could be
it could be any size. It could be. So these little sightings of these craft that are 10 feet across or 5 feet across. So there was another video online too by Chris Leahu, who is awesome, is very good. Responding to a critique of his video by Thunderfoot, who is also awesome. But they are, basically they're just, it's he said, she said type argument, and it all boils down to they don't know. So you can criticize this. They're criticizing the Go Fast video, or supporting it, or analyzing it, or whatever it is, and it boils down to not enough information. You can speculate about what's going on with the Go Fast video and what the pilots are seeing. They're definitely seeing something, but there's not enough information, and the Navy had other instrumentation and other data on this video, and the Navy concluded that it was a UFO, an unknown object. So I'm a little frustrated. I like Thunderfoot's analysis. I think it's great to see that because he's very solid in his analysis. I like Chris Leahu's analysis. The same thing. His analysis are very, very solid, and they're at odds with each other. And that's fine. I mean, that's what good discussion is about. You have people talking both sides of the problem. I don't think any conclusion can be drawn from their observations or arguments other than it's an unknown. More information is needed.
Yep.
So, should I talk about the UFO guy and the Swiss UFO guy just briefly?
How are we doing on time?
We're at an hour and 1 minute, 2 minutes now.
Better probably wrap it up. Save it for next time you're on.
Yes.
Couple weeks.
Yes, I'm gone.
Deb will be back. Well, we'll get Deb back on. Her weird laws episode is doing very well. I think there was we have 50% women listeners, and thank you out there.
On that one?
When Deb goes on, the female listenership goes up. It's interesting.
Oh, of course.
So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments, questions, and requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook at alienprobe.net, Twitter at alienprobepod, and YouTube, which we've exceeded 41,000 views. Thank you very much out there. Thank you for subscribing. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Dr. Bill, for joining us. It's a pleasure, as always. Not sorry, but have a good trip.
Sorry.
Sorry you're not going to be with us next week.
Yep.
But have a good trip. And
okay.
Thanks to our senior producer, Robert Anthony, as always. And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Your work
warehouse.
Yeah,
and he replaced a sink in there, and we had a sink that was rusted, and some the overflow drain on the back the hole.
Yeah,
we were doing an event there. Put his finger comes out and cut my finger.
Oh,
of the customer, and I'm like, "What'd you cut your finger on?" Well, there's a rusted hole in the sink. I go, "Why are you putting your finger in there?
Yeah.
Are you okay? We need to fill out an accident." No, I just thought I'd let you know. Those are all words I hate to hear.
Oh.
And because it's coming. Luckily, nothing ever happened. But I called him, and then of course it was rusted down below, and it was rusted inside as the drain pipe went into the walls.
Oh, yeah.
It turned into some major thing. I'm like, I never would have been able to do that.
Yeah.